Hello everybody, welcome back to another building video. Today we are going to be going over my process of making this massive portal god tree. I hope you guys enjoy the video. So to start off, we're going to be going with our typical voxel terrain. I'm using the voxel cylinders to mark it where I want everything, including a path in the middle, a little island for the tree to sit on, and a bunch of islands surrounding that will be very rocky and just add a lot of atmosphere to the build. Once they're in place, I'm going to be eroding them with the erode brush and then smoothing them out with the blend ball. Once I have all my shapes in place, it's time to think about our colors. I'm going to be going for some very dark colors here. So I go with the darkest grays that I can find in a gradient, some dark browns, and then the darker green colors. Starting off with a gradient ball and then eventually going to the regular voxel ball brush to get the top grass color and replace the rest of the cliff that hasn't been touched. The bottom will then be made to look very rough with cobble, and I will use cyan glass for the water. Now we're going to begin working on our tree, which is of course the center of this build. This tree is going to be absolutely massive. It's over 200 blocks tall, which means I need to make that trunk down there very supportive looking. So I don't want it to be too thin, and I want it to have lots of roots that look like they're going into the rock. It also has to house our portal, of course, so it's very important that it has room to do that as well. For my branches, I'm going to be using much the same concept as with the smaller tree and just going in all different directions, all different layers, making it as organic looking as possible and using lots of different curves. And of course, we are even making use of the curve command here. From the top-down view, you can see it's very important that I'm using a lot of branches here. So I'm starting with a curve command with a radius of 3, then going to 2 and 1, and eventually to no radius at all, which is just the little twigs at the end. You can see I'm adding quite a lot of branches here, and that's very important for a tree of this size. You wouldn't want this type of tree to have only 1 or 2 branches. That just wouldn't make any sense. Once the top part is done, it's time to smooth the bottom. This was mostly done by hand. I put the portal in and replaced it with some gold to make it stand out so that I would not forget it. And then I started doing the root smoothing all by hand, just getting the shapes that I want and really blending them up into the trunk. This was a really important step, and it really made the tree come to life and look like it's really integrated and grown onto that little island that is there. And that is, of course, exactly what I want it to look like, because it did grow there. Now it's time to get our coloring in place. You can see all the different layers of branches I have here, and I'm just going to replace all of my diamond with 1712, which is the ID for the full oak logs. Now it's time for our leaves. Now for our leaves, I'll put the command I used in the description. This is a very cool command. So I made those 3 little bunches of leaves that you just saw, and now I'm using a scatter brush, and what this does is it's pasting these leaves randomly. All 3 different types. So instead of those sphere shapes, I'm getting a lot more random shapes, which is a very nice effect, especially when building on this scale. So I don't want it to look like a bunch of spheres, but I also don't want to be there forever pasting a bunch of tiny little spheres. This was a pretty good compromise, and if you're interested in the command, definitely check it out in the description. It was very helpful. Now that our leaves are in place, it's time to think about the details that we want to do to this tree. So to start, I'm going to be going with a chain that's hanging down off of the branches, which is eventually going to house a lantern. While I'm doing this, Arios is on my plot, and he's teaching me all about Craftscripts. Now, this add-on to World Edit is going to allow me to put some vines around my tree very easily. I'm going to be using jungle saplings for these, as I think they give the best effect, and I just love the detail that that gives to the tree. It really makes it fit in with its surroundings a lot more and makes it look a lot older. Now that all of our hanging stuff is in place, we are going to move on to some atmosphere around the terrain. So starting off, we're going to be doing some mushrooms. So I'm going with some very mystical colors here. So we're going with blues and purples and a couple of earthy toned ones as well, of course. I tried to do a variety of shapes so that when I paste them around and rotate them, they all look slightly different and we get some nice atmosphere going here. So for this one, I'm going with a flatter shape. For the other one, I went with sort of a witch's hat shape. Now I'm going to go for a group of spikier ones with the default mushroom block. I really like the way that red mushroom block looks here. It's so bright and colorful. It really makes it stand out quite a lot. And for the last mushroom, of course, we're going to be going with that bright purple. I absolutely love those colors, and I even threw some glazed terracotta in there, which I think finishes it off very nicely. Now that they're done, we can start pasting those in. I love the way that they look all around that tree down there, and we even pasted a few on the islands. Now we need to think about our water atmosphere. We're going to start with some cattails and eventually move on to the grass and lily pads a little bit later on in the video. So for these cattails, I'm starting off with some smaller ones using soul sand and clay and concrete for that, as well as some wool. Then I'm going to be pasting those randomly around in my water. Let's jump over to our lantern here. So for this, I'm using the darker concrete gray, of course, and I want to create sort of a triangle shape on the top and bottom with some yellow glass inside and a candle burning. I used hoppers for the decor here, and I think that just adds such a nice little touch of detail to that lantern that's hanging. Now we're gonna get a little resident in this tree. This is an owl build. I did this owl on a diagonal, and this is not something that I do very often. I usually build them straight and then rotate them, but I think building them on a diagonal, in this case, on this scale, made it a lot easier for me to make him look very detailed and like he has a lot of shape, even though he's a very tiny build. We of course need to get some color on him and then come back around for some texturing in him. So for this I used different varieties of wood and soul sand and a little bit of the clays as well, and some endstone in his chest. This build is going well so far, however it's still a little bit empty. Let's start filling up the area with the rest of our terrain and our water. So for this we're going to be going with some cute flowers that will go in the water, as well as some longer grasses to fit in. We're also going to be building some ferns to go on the land to just blend in a little bit and give that little touch of detail and atmosphere to the surroundings, really blend it in with that tree. I wanted to make sure the details I was putting in did not take away from the massive tree in the center. I want that to always be the focus, and the pathway leading up to that to really help it out. Speaking of the pathway, we're now going to continue that pathway onto the land here, so that just makes a little bit more sense. Now we're going to move over to the side and work on some lily pads to paste in. We're going to do a smaller lily pad and then a flower being held up by some leaves in the water, and as well a larger lily pad which will house a lily, of course, a pretty pink one. I love the way that these little details turned out, and they look great when they're pasted around in the world. I think they give so much to just filling in and detailing this world. They just add so much. It's so nice to walk around. Now we are almost finished. We're just going to add a few more cattails, just a couple taller ones to get some variety in there, and then we're going to paste those in. And once that is done, all we need to do is focus in on our golden portal here and replace that out with some portal blocks. And then the build is complete. I hope you guys enjoyed watching my process of me making this build. It was honestly so much fun to make. It might actually be one of my favorite build concepts to date. I just love building trees so much. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Please let me know what you think in the comments down below, and if you have any suggestions on what I should build next, please also let me know. I'm always looking for suggestions. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!